Coming up next on Passion Struck.
I really love the word grounded because it really connects to what happens when you don't live in the comparison world. You practice presence. And this is one of the key intentions of intentionality is practice presence over comparison. When we're present, we are now living here and now. We're grounded and we're not living in this fictitious story of the future or the past, which is where the ego hangs out. And the only place that our true divinity lives is here in this present moment. And when we drop into the present moment, we allow some intelligence, some insights to start coming through us. And that's where the greatness really lies.
Welcome to Passion Struck. Hi, I'm your host, John R. Miles, and on the show, we decipher the secrets, tips, and guidance of the world's most inspiring people and turn their wisdom into practical advice for you and those around you. Our mission is to help you unlock the power of intentionality so that you can become the best version of yourself. If you're new to the show, I offer advice and answer listener questions on Fridays. We have long-form interviews the rest of the week with guests ranging from astronauts to authors, CEOs, creators, innovators, scientists, military leaders, visionaries, and athletes. Now, let's go out there and become Passion Struck.
I am absolutely thrilled and extremely honored today to have Finnian Kelly on Passion Struck. Welcome, Finnian.
Thanks, John. I'm really excited as well because we speak a very similar language.
So not only that, but before we came on the show, I asked you where your accent was from, and I guessed it was from Australia. What I didn't tell you is that I spent about 3 years of my life living in Sydney, and I was working at the time for a company you might have heard of called Lendlease. So I'm very familiar with Australia. In fact, I absolutely love the culture of work hard, play hard, and especially being in my early 30s at the time, it was an absolute honor and pleasure to have worked there and experienced so many amazing people and other things.
Yeah, especially in Sydney, that culture it's everything. I don't know where you lived, but I lived in Coogee in Sydney, and everyone's beautiful bodies, they're running, they're partying, they're working. It's just an all-in culture.
Yeah, Manly, and used to just take the commuter boat over back and forth.
Isn't that a nice way to start the morning? Like you talk about 20, just get on a boat, look at the most beautiful harbor bridge in the world, have a coffee on the way, and then just walking to work. It really is special.
Yeah, when I initially started working there before they built their new headquarters, we were in One Australia Square, and you're probably familiar with the round building there, and our views were just breathtaking up there. So it was absolutely an incredible time of my life.
I'm really glad you had that experience. And it's so funny. I've lived now in America for nearly a decade, and it's everyone, when they meet me, one, I'm like, oh, we've got an Australian, and they love it. Hence why I'm in Australia. It's just, I'm a novelty. And then the second is they always, well, I just wish I could go to Australia. And I always just sit there a little bit downplugged, and I went, you can, like, you just get on a plane. But for some reason, they just think it's out of their reach. And I'm always so happy when I meet someone who's lived in Australia.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. Well, speaking of Australia, I always like to start these episodes by going through your story a little bit. And I wanted to ask, how did your early childhood experiences shape the habits and belief systems that you ended up carrying into adulthood?
Well, it's a lot of what my work is about. It's uncovering that there was so much about my childhood impacting my life. And unfortunately, I wasn't fully aware of the impact until it created a scenario in my 30s, which forced me to go and have a really deep look at it. But ultimately, what I learned were a few things. I grew up on a farm in remote Tasmania, and I had a mother who was a doctor, conventional path. My father was a musician and always starting different businesses. So from a young age, I knew the power of making your own money, and I would earn money mowing lawns, selling pine cones, selling sheep manure as fertilizer. So I always had a bit of a financial independence in that regard. And it's not by chance that my first business was starting in financial advice and wealth management because of that. And there was a few events where I didn't really feel like the story that I was telling myself was that I didn't feel safe in my family. I didn't feel the love that I needed. And that created a deep desire for independence. And I was really focusing a lot of the time on, all right, how do I make sure that I'm not relying on anyone else? How do I get myself into the best situations in order to set myself up for the greatest opportunities? So I remember playing tennis, and I look at the other young boys and girls who were playing tennis in the juniors, and I looked at them and they had their parents there, and they were like, had really nice cars, and they had certain tennis rackets and clothes and shoes, which were great. And then every so often I'd get invited over to their place, and I started realizing, whoa, that's a life that I wanted. It wasn't the material side, but it just felt nicer and more loving and more supportive. So I started wondering, well, how do I spend more time with these people? And I identified that there was one school that they were going to, and I asked my parents, can I go to this school? And they said, only if you get a scholarship. So then I went, okay, how do I get a scholarship to the school? And I focused on academics and got a scholarship, and I got myself into this school. And that was my ticket into this group of people. And through their experiences, I started forming a view on life, and I spent as much time with them as possible and learnt from them. And that was a really very defining part of my upbringing, was being around other friends, families. And at the same time, what was quite interesting was in my group of friends, it was an interesting group in my year where we were the academics and also we were the jocks. And we all got the focus was in the school that I was in. It was like, if you're smart, the best thing was to be a doctor. My mum was a doctor. My friends' parents were being doctors. So we all went, oh, let's get into medicine. And I applied for medicine, but I also applied for many other things. I wanted as many options as possible. That was a real theme of my childhood, is like create as many options as possible because I felt limited in my construct. And I got into medicine, and I remember being at a party with my friends celebrating that we were getting into medicine, that we're all going on to this life together. And I just knew at my core, I did not want to be a doctor. I didn't respect the medical profession. I'd witnessed the challenges that it had in my family because my grandparents were doctors and my uncle was a doctor as well. My mum was a doctor. And I just went, I don't want that life. And I, it was effectively an egoic decision. I started thinking, well, I have to do something cooler than being a doctor because otherwise it's going to feel really weird. And I ended up seeing a helicopter pilot in the army came to our school, and I went, well, maybe that sounds cooler. And I applied to do that, and I ended up getting into that, and that started off a military career. And it wasn't the career for me, but I'm very glad that it got me out of the path of medicine because that was the conventional path, and I would have been miserable. And I share this story because it just shows how these little things in our life end up pushing us down a path, and we think this is what we want, but it's not. It's actually through the conditioning and the programming that we're in. And if I was, for example, grew up in another school in another state of Australia, actually, I probably would have been put into investment banking because I was very smart with maths. I was very good at sales. I liked that experience, but we didn't even have that exposure in where I grew up in Tasmania. So I want people to always question, like one of the great questions that you can ask is like, what do you want? And I ask that to people all the time. And there's either three different scenarios. They either have no idea what they want, or what they want isn't what they actually want. It's been a conditioned program. Or the third is they don't believe they can have what they want. And we've got to transcend that and get clarity through a self-discovery. And this is where intentionality can come through, is to go, I'm actually going to start living my life on my terms.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think what you're describing is a condition that so many people find themselves in. I actually wrote about it in my book that came out in February. And that is, I found for a significant portion of my adulthood, I was wearing what I refer to as the mask of pretense. I was
Mhm.
showing up inauthentically, doing this career where I was making great money, but didn't feel fulfilled by anything that I was doing. Yet I felt stuck there because I had now grown into the house that we were living in, the cars we were driving, the lifestyle we were doing. And I couldn't figure out how to navigate my way out of it for many years until a couple defining moments happened in my life that gave me the clarity and also that push to do something different. And I think we all have defining moments in life. Was there a story or two that changed your own worldview? You've just talked about one, but have there been others?
Yeah, there's been many, John. So one was when I created a vision when I started my first business with my partner. And it was this idea of, okay, it was a really interesting opportunity. When we first met, we fell in love and we went, well, let's go travel the world. And we booked a trip to South America. We were like, let's just go adventuring for a couple of years. And then this business opportunity came up very early on in our relationship. And it seemed almost too good to be to not take this opportunity. And probably when I look back, a little bit of scarcity, a little bit of ego came through to go, no, we've got to do this because otherwise I'm falling behind my friends who are doing really well. And the way we justified it was, well, let's go on a trip. So in the first year of business, we took a month off and we traveled, but let's make travel a regular part, but let's build a company and then sell it and then be financially free and then go travel as much as we want. So we created this vision for a 5-year journey to sell a company, and then we'll go overseas. And in that time, we had incredible success in companies. We actually started multiple companies. We sold 2 by the time that sort of vision was ended at being over. We ended up moving to America, lived in a ski resort, a big mansion, and it was a really interesting experience because I had sold myself a story that when I achieve all of this, when this occurs, then I can enjoy life. And I still enjoyed life in that time, but it was like, I'll feel peace and I'll feel content. And we got there, we actually achieved our vision, which most people don't in their life. So they can just live in the illusion of, well, I've got to keep going in the vision. But we actually achieved that vision. And it was actually one of the most confronting times because the illusion came crashing down. And then a series of events occurred, which seemed all random, but they actually occurred at once, which created basically a huge disruption in my life, which resulted in a legal suit in a business, financial loss, feeling burnt out in another business, returning all the capital out of our own financial means. So there was a financial burden there, father-in-law dying, and then ultimately the greatest abandonment, which was the end of my relationship with my wife. And it came very confronting. And that was the moment where I was forced to really look internally and go, well, I can't trick myself anymore. Like that path of, well, I just got to keep achieving all these things and do this, and then I'll feel that way because I'd actually already done that. And I started going, okay, well, I'm the common denominator here. I need to really take accountability for my life if I want this transformation. And I need to start exploring what is happening below the surface. Because consciously, I was living a very intentional life and it still wasn't working. And that's when I went through a deep discovery of understanding how the mind works, looking at the different ancient spiritual and text and scripture and looking at what are the common themes. And that's when I started pulling back everything back from my childhood and looking, going, wow, I haven't really had free will this whole time. I haven't been making decisions what I really want. It's just been a byproduct of a series of other decisions that came from potentially a faulty perspective from a child who just didn't really know what was going on and made these interpretations to protect themselves, but it wasn't working for me anymore. And the great paradox was what achieved all my success, like how I was winning awards, achieving financial independence, all these things that other people looked at my life and went was incredible. It was also the piece that pulled me down. And that's been my big lesson, is that whatever is built on the foundations, it will always come through. And if your foundations are built on negative belief loops, eventually that negative belief loop will come so strong that it will just cause a catalytic event. And then you'll have to be forced to wake up. And now what I really want to do with people is share that you don't have to go through such a traumatic event to wake up. It's one way of waking up and becoming more conscious. It's just a very hard way. It's a very dangerous way. Not everyone recovers. Instead, what I'd love for you to do is have awareness where you realize you're really unhappy, you're dissatisfied, you're not feeling states of peace, and use that as an opportunity to go, all right, I need to explore this and I need to start looking at what may be contributing to this unsatisfaction. Because a lot of people have been told a story, they're bought into a story, they're running these codified programs, they're never going to lead to really a high states of being, which are peace, love, and joy.
I think what you just said is so important for the audience to hear. And it was important for me to hear because it's the same journey I took. I remember coming out of the military and my goal was to become an FBI agent. As growing up as a kid, I always saw myself as being that person who was going to lead a life of action, and I wasn't going to be constrained to be behind a desk, etc. And then, literally 3 days before I'm supposed to go to Quantico, the whole thing gets taken away from me, and it was one of the darkest periods of my life. Congress couldn't pass a funding bill, and my class gets recycled. Turns out to be 3.5 years later, and the opportunity just passed me by, and I started going down what I call this portfolio career, where it was almost out of necessity. I had to do something to support myself and my family at the time. And then we had our first child, and life just went. And before I knew it, I experienced the same thing that you're talking about. I had all these accolades. I was the youngest vice president in one of the Fortune 50s I was in. I was chief information officer of a Fortune 50 before I was 40 years old. And on the outside, people looked at it and all the money I was making, the roles I had. And what they didn't see was inside my life was just in utter turmoil. And I felt myself becoming so numb and so disengaged with everything that I held so dear. And I just started spiraling into this feeling of quiet desperation that Henry David Thoreau discusses. Is
Mhm.
this in any way resemble what you were feeling yourself?
Yeah, it's a great description, John. And it certainly was where you're just so lost. And what happens is we actually imprison ourselves. That's the real thing we do. We are so running the program, and the program's so strong that we don't even realize that there's other paths that you can take. And I see this all the time. I'm getting really called into do a lot of work with in SF right now and the Bay Area, the Silicon Valley, because there's corporate leaders there who are really dictating the world. And there is, I don't want to be negative on this place, but there is a disease running through this area of the country right now. There is so much comparison. People thinking that they're not wealthy because they're friends with a billionaire, because so many people have become tech wealthy, even though they're sitting in incredibly wealthy houses and they have more money than anyone can imagine, but they're comparing to someone else. There's this feeling of never doing enough, that their company isn't performing well enough. So they're judging their whole value around that experience. And we need to help bring some perspective to these people that you do have choice, and there's other ways that people are living their life, and you don't have to put yourself in this situation. And I think that the biggest challenge which I see with people is that they're in this situation and they say they want one thing, but their actions are completely not in line with that. And that's a cue that perhaps there's a subconscious program which is running, which is working against you. And the subconscious is a quantum computer. It's so much more powerful than the conscious mind. And that's where we need to start exploring, going, perhaps we're out of alignment and we need to explore some different paths. And it's amazing. It makes me feel really sad. There's people who say they want, for example, they want to bring a child into this world. And I look at how they're living and I'm reflecting because I've got a child coming on my way myself. And I looked at the intentionality that we did to bring this child into the world. And think of this, a smart soul. Why would the soul want to come into this world right now with the way you're living? Like, you're not creating a vessel which is feeling beautiful and loving, like it's stressed out. And I tell them, like, how much do you want this? Are you willing to take a year off work, for example? And it's really challenging. They see this like, it's almost like their circuit starts short circuiting because they're like, how could I do that? Then I'm going to be behind. And I went, well, you already have financial freedom, and they don't realize that actually is an option. I just use that as an example because it's the disconnect with people with how much do you really want this? Are you willing to go all in and potentially sacrifice some things for the better opportunity of what you want? And we were having a chat before getting on this call about, like, why are you doing so well with your podcast? I asked you, like, what has been the theme there? And well, you went, well, you know what? I just focused, I just wanted to build this as an incredible foundation, and I was going to say no to other things. And I'm not saying no forever. It's just not now. Not now is a great word. Not now, but not forever. And now you're in a place where you're in a strong foundation. You can say yes to say some of these opportunities, and you can have it all. You just can't have it all at that initial time. And I think that's the challenge right now, because we've been sold this message that more is better and we need to have it all now, because that's how literally we are code programmed. It's coding, marketing is just bombarding us, impressing our subconscious, going, you're in lack, you're not enough, you need all this now. And it just puts us into a constant state of never being enough. And that's not in a great place. And I really connected with you, John, because I'm in a similar place right now, is where everyone's going, whoa, your life is really expansive right now. And how are you handling it all? And I went, well, because I was very intentional about it. I focused on, let's make sure that I am in the greatest place first. I literally tapped out of the world for 5 years, focusing on nourishing myself and going on a beautiful journey of radical self transformation, exploring my consciousness, expanding myself. So I was ready for when I wanted to go back out into the world. I was in a place where I could actually handle that tension and that friction. And now the funny thing is, I will accelerate past what I could have done if I had taken all those opportunities at the start. Because now I'm not operating in a linear construct. I'm operating in the quantum world where things can start being really powerful and it's sustainable. And it's because we have the discipline to pace. And pacing is a very important part of life, to go, you know what? I'm willing to slow down right now, even though it feels like I'm missing out on opportunities, because I'm going to be able to capitalize in the future.
Yeah, I want to touch on a few of the things that you just talked about, Finian. And the first one, I want to go back to the comparison trap that you were talking about with people in the Bay Area and San Francisco. This is something that Dr. Benjamin Hardy has a great book on, called The Gap versus the Gain. And so often in times we find ourselves living in the gap, where we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people that we see who are living bigger than we are, or that we think we're living bigger. I often say it's like me being a podcaster. Even though I've done great things, if I'm trying to compare myself to Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan or Jordan Harbinger, I'm constantly going to be in the gap, because they've been doing it for so much longer and
Yes.
have built such a bigger platform. But if I were living in the gain, I would be viewing myself against my past self and seeing how far I've come along that path. And just being intentional about that shift and how you view your life is eye opening, because it grounds you and it gives you the comfort to know that you are improving, that you are doing enough, that you are taking strides. So that was one thing I wanted to comment on. And I think another thing that you brought up that's extremely important is just the whole concept of intentionality, which is something that we love to explore here. And we're going to be diving deeper into your book, which is actually titled Intentionality. And I understand you trademarked it, which I'm jealous you were able to do. But your
Uh,
book subtitle is A Groundbreaking Guide to Breath, Consciousness, and Radical Transformation. And I think I've talked about the definition of intentionality on this show, but I think it's important for you to also give your definition of it, so people are grounded by what you mean by it.
Thanks, John. I really loved the word grounded, because it really connects to what happens when you don't live in the comparison world. You practice presence. And this is one of the key intentions of intentionality, is practice presence over comparison. When we're present, we are now living here and now. We're grounded, and we're not living in this fictitious story of the future or the past, which is where the ego hangs out on. And the only place that our true divinity lives is here in this present moment. And when we drop into the present moment, we allow some intelligence, some insights to start coming through us. And that's where the greatness really lies. And so often what happens is we are actually in an incredible present moment, but we're not enjoying it, because we either are living in the past about something that happened, or we're comparing ourselves of where we want to be. And we can't actually enjoy the fruits of our labor right now and enjoy the incredible state we're in. And the funny thing is, if you can't enjoy the present moment now, even when you achieve that future state that you've been wanting, you won't be able to enjoy it then either. And that's one of the greatest challenges. I learned that very early when I built a wealth management career. I helped all these people build financial freedom and reach their retirement. But if you haven't practiced enjoying holidays and being present, you actually retire and you become miserable. Some of the greatest depressions that I saw were these successful old white men who had reached financial freedom, lived the corporate ladder, and then suddenly they had no identity and they had no meaning because they didn't know how to actually get meaning from life otherwise besides their status and their financial income. And no one really cares about that later. So I'm really glad you brought up the present side of things. So going back to the definition of intentionality, how I define it in its simplest terms is identifying how you want to feel and then taking incremental steps towards making that a reality. Now, the really key thing there is it's a feelings first approach. We've been conditioned to want outcomes, goals, materialistic achievements. And by the nature of that, there's some time in the future because we say, when I get this, I'll perhaps feel a particular way. And you ask anyone why they want a particular goal or an outcome, and you keep asking why, eventually it always comes back to a feeling. It comes back to why I want to feel love. I want to feel freedom. I want to feel safe. So then I started realizing, well, if that's what we actually want, why we want any goal, why aren't we making that the priority? Let's instead make the focus on the feelings and let's prioritize them. And the incredible thing about feelings are you can have those feelings right now. So if I want to have built up all this wealth because I want to feel free, or I want to feel peace, I can then flip it and go, well, how could I actually feel peace today, regardless of my financial situation? How could I feel free today? And then that helps drive actions in the present moment to bring more of that into my experience. And it means I don't have to waste 5 years of my life hoping that I'll get there and then to only be surprised by the illusion of when. And it is everything. And if people just literally woke up in the morning and went, okay, how do I want to feel today? And make that as the driving force of making their decisions throughout the day, their life will just naturally change. And before they know it, they would be in a state of expansiveness that they didn't even know was possible without even setting goals.
I look at it, and I thank you for that definition. I look at it as this state where you're matching your values and your intrinsic motivation and aligning it with your ambitions and long-term aspirations. I think that oftentimes that we think our actions, our ambitions, and our aspirations are separate entities, and we don't realize how interrelated they are and how much the core values that we have plays a role in holding all of them together, and the importance of being consistent in the actions that you're taking against your midterm ambitions and your long-term aspirations. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And it's interesting, over the past couple of days, I think sometimes the universe just brings these things in at the right moment. But I happened to be preparing for a solo episode and I was doing some research on Paul Harvey, and I hadn't listened to his episode. I'm not sure if you've ever listened to it, but he
No,
did
I
an
haven't.
open letter from God.
Mm,
And in this, he was talking about how we have all these religions, all these ideologies, all these practices that end up separating us instead of uniting us. And what he was trying to say in this is that all of these things are man-made, and they're
mhm.
different interpretations of the influences that we have in our life. And instead of looking at these as detractors, we should be looking at these diverse influences as uniters. And in intentionality, you actually do this. You draw on several religions, ideologies, and practices, and you use them in a way that complement rather than compete against each other. Can you explain how you do that?
I really appreciate that you discovered that. It's as you go on this spiritual path, and I define spirituality as simply getting to know yourself. Because once you get to know yourself, you realize there's something bigger than you. and you'll feel something, which is a really great place. And I've had enough experiences now where I've had that feeling of oneness and the feeling that everything is connected and we're all just images of God getting to know itself. And you start realizing that, ah, there is common themes in every different religion, every different sect. There is a common message, and there's a common message about we are one, and that breath is the great connector. It brings us all together, and that we are love. And there's a core message of all of them. And then I think what I loved about this is you brought up the great stories that yes, there's truth to all of this, but then there's also the man, the individual ego, which hijacks these truths to get a outcome that they want. And now I just witness it when everyone says they're like a religious or a spiritual person, but they're causing conflict between people. I go, well, you might conceptually label yourself of that, but you're not that person because you're not connecting to that. Because anything that creates separation isn't love. It's not godly. It's not divine. And it's really sad how people will label themselves something without actually questioning what does that really mean, and how do we live by that ourselves. Ultimately, we are on an individual journey, and I believe everyone has the rights to any belief that they want. That's the beautiful thing about the human experience. However, there's two things. One, we need to remind ourselves you only have those beliefs if the beliefs are serving you. And if they're making you unhappy, feeling unrest, not safe, then that's an example that these beliefs are not serving you. And also, if these beliefs are causing you to separate from other humans and hurt other humans, and those beliefs aren't fair either. We're an individual having an individual journey as a collective journey. And ultimately, that's what we're really here to do, is to see how do we all come back together and connect. And it's really confusing and it's very sad what's happening in the world right now. How can we be at a state where consciousness is rising up so much, but then we see all this separation? And that's the great paradox of what's happening in the world right now, because consciousness is rising up more than we've ever seen. But at the same time, when consciousness rises up, the nature of there's always polarity, some darkness rises up as well. But that's not a sign that the world is in a bad place. It's just becoming more prevalent. And I see it as before, like in war, always the greatest fights are before the war's just before the war's about to be over. And I feel like that's happening in the world right now. Is it feels like it's getting worse, but it's actually because it's getting better. And that's a belief that I like to lean on because it serves me. It creates me to be in a more positive, optimistic place. I can see the fragility in what's going on. I'm not caught up in the story and the drama. And instead I'm focusing on, well, how do I just bring more light into this world? And if more of us focused on that, rather than focusing on the negativity, getting caught up into the drama of the media and lowering our vibrational frequency, which then just attracts more darkness, we would move through this very quickly. And that's what I empower to all these people is like, all right, what are you doing right now? Like, is it helping you get really negative over the situation? Or could you drop into your heart center and feel the love and feel the connection to all? And could you send love to these people? Could you start having more connections into your everyday life? And before we know that, our fields start interacting with other people's fields. And what we are doing here may help in a war-torn country because you have now effectively potentially rubbed up with a person who's now rubbing up with someone in that place. And it might be the moment where someone questions their beliefs and suddenly went, whoa, why are we doing this? This is hurting other people. Children are dying, all these different elements. And that might be the catalyst for real lasting change in the world. So I always share this, like never underestimate your power to change the world, but you can't do it by thinking about anyone external. It has to be an internal state. The only thing you can do is change your field, change your energetic experience. And then by nature, knowing that we're all connected and through the universal mind, this universal field of intelligence, you have now changed the field by your current state because it's a two-way relationship.
Yeah, what you're describing about the time we're living in right now, I mean, it's really an eye-opening period. And here in Tampa, we are very close to both Special Operations Command and CENTCOM, which is currently overseeing what's happening between Israel and the Palestine nation. And we are just on the precipice of all out conflict if we're not careful with how all these things unfold. And it is something I know I really don't want to think about on a daily basis, but the world is really on the edge right now. And it is so worrisome to me how, when we're not being intentional about the actions that we're taking to one another, how this could so quickly implode and go into a direction that won't serve anyone on this planet. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I will leave that there.
Mhm.
I want to go into your book, and for a listener who hasn't been able to pick up a copy yet, the way that Finian goes through the book is, in part one, he covers your system. In part two, he goes into your coding. Part three, it goes into recoding. And in that recoding, he goes into things such as how repetition impacts us, how energy can intervene in both positive and negative ways. And then he goes into behaviors and tools that you can use to lead an intentional life. And I wanted to go into your system to start out with. And the first thing that you really go into is breath. And you just talked about it being the great connector and how it plays this role in linking each of us to each other and the world around us, despite the differences that we face. And I want to ask you, given its fundamental importance and the unique ability we have to control it consciously, as you talked about, can you discuss how focusing on our breath can help us to not only reconnect with ourselves, but also help us foster a deeper unity and understanding of others?
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up. So when we think about breath, what symbolizes life? And that baby comes out and takes its first breath. It's like, oh, baby's alive. And then if anyone's witnessed someone cross into after they've passed, the final thing is breathing out. And life is a series of breaths coming in and coming out. And when we focus on our breath, what it does is it brings us into the present moment. It grounds us and reminds us, wow, I am alive. And when we breathe in, and you actually think about this, and I talk about this later in the book about making your miracle, all we have to do to believe in miracles is to connect to when we breathe in, think what's happening there. Oxygen's coming in, mixing with glucose, and then that gives us energy to do everything in our life. And we don't have to think about that. It's just automatically happening. That is a miracle. Breath is also the thing that we can't live without for the shortest amount of time. So I started looking at breath. There was all these messages about breath, and I went, why? Like, how can we use this breath for our benefit? And the key part of the breath is it's the one faculty of the body which happens automatically through the autonomic immune system. It's just automatically happening. We don't have to think about it, but we can also consciously drive it to get certain outcomes. If I'm going for a run, I can speed up my breath. If I want to relax, I can elongate my breath out. And I started realizing, wow, that's the bridge between the conscious and the subconscious minds. And ultimately, what we're trying to do to create a great life for us is to get alignment between the conscious minds, the subconscious mind, and the universal mind, this universal intelligence. And when we have alignment, that's when we feel really great. We're living an intentional life. So how can we use the breath to help us, one, bring awareness to potentially when subconscious programs are running, which aren't serving us? So what happens sometimes is I'll notice that I'm getting triggered and energy is building up, and I'll take a breath to slow everything down and stop myself from short circuiting myself where I get into a negative place, and just bring awareness. Oh, what's happening for me right now? Oh, I'm feeling some anger. I'm not angry. I'm just feeling some sensations of anger or some sadness. Also, when we think about, so that might help me go, okay, I need to process this rather than do a behavior which is going to lead to some unpleasant situation in my life. Another really great thing about breath, if you've ever seen someone who's crying or in a really bad place, and maybe parents know this when their kid is in like a stressful, panic place, what do? We go up and hold them And we start breathing in a slower, calm place. And what naturally happens? Their breath starts regulating down as well because we are connected. We're now breathing in the same energy. And we start relaxing through it as well. When we breathe in, think about this. What are we doing? Everyone else has breathed this air. We're now actually breathing in different particles, cells of other humans. And the person you think is an enemy, you suddenly realize, well, they're inside of you as well. We're all breathing off the same source of energy. So just doing that practice naturally helps you realize, oh, we're not so different. We're all the same beings breathing in the same air. Maybe the view I have of that person isn't actually true. And that's what I really want people to start doing with the breath, is start paying attention to your breath. The other beautiful thing about the breath is that every time something happens to you, whether someone interacts with you, someone talks to you, two things occur in the body. Sensations will arise in the body. There might be a tightness, an openness, a sensation, or, and I mean, your breath, your respiration will change somehow. So if you notice that when someone walks into the room, your breath suddenly goes a little bit short and shallow, it might be a sign that, oh, that person, I can't trust that person fully. Or if you notice, wow, I just feel really calm around that person, that's one of your people who you can actually communicate to. So there's all these little cues that we can use from the breath to help us identify what current state are we in and what do we need to do from here. And it becomes super prevalent, especially in a business place, is you can use this to help you make better decision making. If you identify that, oh, you're going through a deal transaction and you notice that the breath is really calm, really open, like you are when you're really in a loving state, that's a sign maybe this is a good deal or a good new business to launch or a good new product to launch. But if suddenly you observe that your breath is really tight and shallow, that might be a signal, oh, let's put a pause on this and let's explore it. So I share this as a tool because ultimately we're all stretched for time. That's the biggest thing that people are saying. But we don't actually need more time. What we need to get better at is get better at decision making. Because when you get better at decision making, naturally you collapse time and things start opening up for you.
Finian, thanks for sharing that. And I wanted to lead into your section on energy that's in part one. Albert Einstein famously once said, everything is energy. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy, this is physics. Can you describe how this quote relates to our energy centers and its relationship with intentionally cultivating what we want in life?
Now, often we label something as science, and we've associated a lot of science as what we can see with our see and feel with our senses. But energy is everything. If we actually break down everything in life at the simplest terms, all it is energy. And when we realize that the world is a holographic universe, it's a representation of what's happening in the internal, the external is a representation of the internal, the macros and the micros and the macro, we start realizing that everything that is projected out there is a result of what's happening in here. So then we can start taking agency. It's a really great thing because it means we actually do have ability to change our situation, our life. We can start going, well, what is my energy right now? Am I in when I say high vibrational state, am I operating in a feeling state, which is these stronger emotions of love and abundance and peace and joy? And naturally, when you're in that state, it starts attracting energy in that place. Dr. David Hawkins talks about this concept of attractor fields is whatever energy you're is, you start almost being a trap for that energy as well. So if you're in a loving state, you just start trapping energy. But if you're in a fierce state, you attract more of that into your life. So if we're not liking what's happening in our life, we need to look into ourselves and go, okay, what am I doing to contribute to this? And naturally, when you start stepping in and opening up these different energy centers through your body and start going, all right, am I being the attractive field to that type of energy? Am I attracting that in? You'll start realizing, wow, you can literally change anything in your life and bring more of it as well. So the first thing I do whenever I work with people is rather than focusing on everything else in their life, we don't even focus on goals or anything. We just go, how's your energy? Let's look at how do we build your energy? And there's some really simple things you can do, which they talk about basically the formula for anything to get out of depression, to improve your state. It's some simple things. Are you getting good sleep? Are you nourishing yourself with good, healthy food? You exercising? Are you getting sunlight? All these, are you grounding into the earth? There's all these natural energy centers wanting to build you up. And once you get into that place, now you can then start raising your energy into a higher level where you start going, all right, I'm now going to operate from a place of love. And I trust that if I just love people, then I'm going to get more love back. And I was working with someone recently, and he said to me, Finn, it's so strange. The more I give love, it's crazy. The more I get back, it actually feels like I feel a little bit guilty. I keep wanting to give more love, but I keep getting so much love back. It feels unjust. And I went, that's the secret, brother. That is the formula. Give love, and it just naturally has to come back. It's not limited. It's unlimited. That's the thing about love. It's not a scarce resource. And if everyone just realized that is the formula to life, wow, wouldn't it be incredible? What are we doing right now? We think because we've been brought up in a scarce mindset that when someone has something, that means I haven't got something. We then get jealous and we get envious. And when people are experiencing these lives, rather than thinking, well, how could I contribute to someone else's life? And naturally, it'll come back to me. And one of the quotes that really helped me during my dark night of my soul, that period where I was feeling completely lost, was the best way to lose yourself is in the service of others. And it was by Gandhi. And I really reflected anytime I got consumed in my story and I started thinking about, oh, how have I ruined my life? How can it be this way? Poor me, the typical sadness story. That was a cue for me. Okay, how can I help someone else? And I'd go help someone else, whether it was just calling a friend, doing a random act of kindness, smiling at someone. And before I knew it, I started feeling a little bit better. And then if you look at most people who have gone to some stage of, I don't know, I don't want to call it enlightenment, but some form of higher state of consciousness, what's the connection? They've effectively dedicated their life to service. And the funny thing is, it doesn't have to be in conflict with creating a material life as well. I'm creating more abundance by helping people right now than I ever did before. And it's fascinating. I go, wow, the more I help people, the more I create wealth for myself. It doesn't have to be in conflict.
No, it absolutely does not. And I appreciate you sharing that, because that scarcity mindset is something that so many of us find ourselves in. And I think this leads us right into one of the next concepts you talk about in the book, which is belief loops, which you've talked about a little bit, can be negative, perpetuating patterns that limit our potential, or positive, which enhance our lives through conscious recoding, which is a core component of your book. Can you elaborate on the process of identifying and transforming a negative belief loop into a positive one, and how this transformation can lead to us being more intentional and empowered in the way that we live?
So a core premise in the book I talk about at the start is we're all born with the same resources and tools that we need to have in order to have a really expansive human life. And that is the breath, our minds, and effectively the universal mind, this universal field intelligence. It doesn't matter where you're brought up, what gender, what situation, they're the levelers that we all have. Now, obviously, some people do get like a head start in these other areas with financial realm sometimes, but also that could also be a setback from them, because then they might have a negative coding around scarcity. It all depends on these belief loops, which I'm about to go in. And belief loops are a foundational part of all of us. We all have these running the whole time. It just depends whether they're positive or negative. So what is a belief loop? A belief loop is, I do this in the imagery so people can understand. Our beliefs shape our thoughts, which shape our behaviors, which shape our feelings, and then the feelings reaffirm the belief cycle. These beliefs are stored down on a subconscious level. And by the nature of the subconscious, it's an energy efficient machine. Once the program is in there, it doesn't want to change the program, because it was put in to help us save energy, because the conscious mind isn't as advanced as the subconscious. So it goes, all right, I'll create a belief around that. And then it will send up certain thoughts, which will drive behaviors, which will result in feelings. And the feelings are what create the beliefs in the first place. And one of the challenges of the subconscious is it doesn't have the ability to deduce between truth and untruth. It just takes on whatever the strongest emotion is as to be true. So we really need to bring awareness of what these beliefs are, because these beliefs are shaping 95% plus of our decisions of our life. And if we're not aware of them, we may be having beliefs that are negative. And I talk about negative belief loops just in the perspective of, are they bringing like low vibrational feelings or positive, vibrational feelings into your life? And we need to explore and go, okay, what's happening there? Are they working for me? And the way is everything is through the feelings. I can tell straight away whether you have positive belief loops because you're feeling more of those vibrational feelings, or if you have negative belief loops, you're in a place where you're constantly unrest, you're sad, you're questioning things. Is going through a process of awareness. In order to do any transformation, we need to become aware first. How do we do this? Well, we journal, we reflect, we start looking at, wow, I was really triggered by that today. We use coaches, we do group work, lots of different ways to bring awareness. The key is we have to be open to what we discover, because the next step is acceptance. We have to accept we may believe, like we conceptually might want to believe that we're a really abundant, kind person. But if we actually look at our behaviors and our feelings, we might discover that perhaps we're not. Doesn't mean we don't want to be, but there's a program which is being determined from effectively from our childhood, which is creating this undesirable situation in our life. Until you accept that, you're just going to keep living in the illusion and you're not going to confront it. So I had to accept at certain points in my life, wow, here I was thinking I was a really kind person and really loving, but I did some things that weren't very kind. So maybe that's a belief loop that was running there. Here I was thinking I was a very abundant person. However, I was living my life actually built off fear and living in scarcity and always questioning, like, will this be enough? Will this work? And once I accepted that, I could start seeing, well, how is this playing out in my life? And is this serving me? No. Then I can go through a process of releasing these belief loops. And how do we go through a process of recoding the belief loops? There's really two avenues. One is through repetition. The subconscious takes on directions through a repetitive feeling, which eventually becomes so strong that the subconscious goes, all right, I'm going to form a belief over that. So something you think over repetitively, you behave a certain way, results in a feeling, and the subconscious goes, all right, I'm going to create a belief around that. So naturally, one way to recode it is make sure that we're putting impressions on the subconscious, which is aligned with the new positive belief loop. So we map out the negative belief loop, and then we go, okay, what would someone with a positive belief loop, what would that look like? Well, they would have this belief. These are the thoughts that they would pay attention to, the mental chatter in the world. These are the behaviors that they would do, and this is what they would feel. And then every day, you then have to do the behaviors in line with that positive belief loop, even though internally it might be telling you, no way, you can't do that. That's not going to serve you. But we've already identified you can't trust yourself when you have that negative belief loop. It's telling you to do the opposite. So you have to manually override the system by doing the new behaviors. And when you do that, something will occur. You'll start feeling some of those, because there's always an outcome when you do that. And when you do a cause, there's an effect. And you start feeling some of those feelings. And eventually one day you might realize, wow, I'm not even thinking about this anymore. I've created a new positive belief loop. It's happening. So I like to describe that as brushing your teeth, flossing your teeth. It's like the manual work that you need to do in order to make sure that your teeth are really nice and clean. You have a good oral hygiene. Sometimes though, those belief loops are so deep and so ingrained that the energy is so suppressed that we need a really strong energetic force to go down and dislodge them and bring them up. And that's what I like to call energy interventions. With a very short amount of time, with a lot of energy focus, we go, all right, we're going to go down and blast these negative belief loops to get them out of our system. So then we can recode through repetition with these new positive belief loops. And these energy interventions are things like deep breath journeys, medicine journeys, certain modalities where we're getting into the body, we're having a felt experience. It has to be through a felt experience because it's stored in the body. I've done things like darkness retreats, silent meditation retreats. It's a condensed period where I bring them up and it gets released. And in the dental analogy, I like to think of this going to the dentist to get a deep clean or some reconstructive surgery. And you get a chance of coming out and you're like, oh, I'm fresh. Now, the challenge is if you don't brush and floss your teeth, it's just going to go back to the old ways. So you need to do the daily repetition. And that's why the two are so important. And this is why a key part of intentionality is integration. Whenever you have a transformational period, you got to do the integration work as well. You've got to support it. You got to naturally make it feel stronger and bond. And when we do that and we combine both of these, that's when we get the radical transformation. And it's a continuous process. We work on a negative belief loop, we rewrite it with a new one, we work on that, and then we go through another process and we discover, oh, wow, there's another negative belief loop. And we keep going through this iterative process and it never stops because constantly the subconscious is waiting to be coded. And if we're not the coder, who else is? Society, media, all these conditions. And this happens a lot of the time. Sometimes you did have a positive belief loop. And then over time, because of the situation you're in, maybe right now, what's happening right now, people were believing in love and now they're seeing horrific things. And now maybe fear is starting to creep into their life. Or they were in an abundant state and then a global recession happened and their financial states were ruined and they don't identify with being in a scarcity mindset, but it did change. So it's a constant process of one, protecting our subconscious and then going, okay, are we coding it with what we want it to be coded for?
Last thing I really wanted to ask you is we've covered a lot today. If someone were to pick up this book, what is the one thing that you're hoping readers will take away from it and how it can impact their life?
Well, ultimately, what I want people to realize is I talk about with this book, it's an operating system, really. Like I go through and you mentioned the 4 steps. It's like first you have to understand your system because we're all given the same system. And some people are using this system a lot better than others. You then need to understand that we've been coded. Doesn't matter how incredible your parents think you were. They never were able to give you what you truly needed. And that's what we needed is unconditional love. And so we've been coded. Some people have been coded with positive things. Some people have been coded with negative. Some people have been coded with a combination of the two. And then we do have a process that we can recode. So effectively, the one thing I want people to take away is that you have no idea how good life can be. You think of a version of life. Life is unlimited. It's expansive. And when you step on this path of intentionality, you are going to have an expansive human experience. And everything can be changed. That's really like the final thing that I want people to hear is that everything can be changed. You are not permanent in anything. Actually, the only thing that is permanent in life is change. That's the only thing that is permanent. But for some reason, we have such a resistance to change and we don't believe it's possible. But I'm telling you, it is. And I've witnessed amazing transformations of people where they didn't know it was possible and their life is completely changed.
Finian, it was such a pleasure to have you today. What an amazing book. I highly encourage the audience to pick up a copy. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, John. I appreciate your dedication to your craft.
What an incredible honor that was to interview Finnian Kelly, and I wanted to thank Hay House and Finnian for the honor and privilege of joining us here today. Links to all things Finnian will be in the show notes on passionstruck.com. Please use our website links if you purchase any of the books from the guests that we feature here on the show. And speaking of books, I have a recommended book page on the Passion Struck website under the Passion Struck podcast page, and it consists of over 200 books that I've read and personally recommend. Go and check them out. Videos are on YouTube at both our main channel at John R. Miles and our Clips channel at Passion Struck Clips. Please go and join over 250,000 other subscribers who tune in to our weekly videos. Advertiser deals and discount codes are in one convenient place at passionstruck.com/deals. Please consider supporting those who support the show. I am at John R. Miles on all the social platforms where I post daily bits of inspiration, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. Are you curious to find out where you stand on the path to becoming passion struck? Then dive into our engaging Passion Struck quiz. Crafted to reflect the core principles that I share in my latest book, Passion Struck, this quiz offers you a dynamic way to gauge where you stand on your path to becoming passion struck. It consists of only 20 questions and takes about 10 minutes of your time. Take the quiz today. You're about to hear a preview of the Passion Struck podcast interview that I did with Dr. Mary Murphy, a Stanford-trained psychologist, CEO
of the Equity Accelerator and distinguished protege of Carol Dweck. Mary shares in her interview groundbreaking insights on how to identify your triggers, challenge genius worship, embrace failure, how purposeful effort can promote the growth of neural brain cells, and so much more.
When I think about people who've had different work experiences and they're able to see how in one work environment they self-present in a particular way, certain things are really important. The ways of behaving are very a particular way, but then you go into another context and things are totally different, right? The expectations, the norms, the interactions, they're totally different. And so we see this, but yet we always come back to defaulting that it's the individual who needs to change. And this is really important in mindset research. For years and years, we thought of mindset as just a quality in our head. And then the solution was, well, if you have a fixed mindset, just change your mind. And that's obviously easier said than done, but it actually ignores the mindset context, the mindset culture around us. And what our research most recently has shown is that mindset culture actually can trump many of the experiences that we have when it comes to the ability to use and benefit from our mindset.
Remember that we rise by lifting others, so share the show with those that you love and care about. And if you found today's episode with Finnian Kelly useful, then definitely share it with those who could use his inspiration. In the meantime, do your best to apply what you hear on the show so that you can live what you listen. Until next time, go out there and become passion struck.